the idea for this particular roundtable was has been sort of percolating. This has been on my mind and in discussion for a while, just trying to figure out the way we would want to approach this as a sort of a crossover between some of the mental health issues and the spirituality resilience issues that I think people confront as they go through these processes. And one of the things that we discovered as Whistleblowers of America is that we've been doing some surveys on whistleblower mental health. And when we asked people, oh, here's Joe, yay, I was getting worried. So as we asked people some of the things about what led them to be a whistleblower, what were some of the influencing things in their whistleblowing, we found that 69% endorsed having a faith-based component to their whistleblowing, which I thought was really powerful, that that sense of spirituality played a role. But then when we asked later on about who did you get support from, only 16% of the respondents said that they talked to their clergy about their whistleblowing. So we thought that there's this gap there that we were curious about and that we're hoping to look at more and to figure out how to either fill the gap or help deal with the gap. So I reached out to a dear friend, Sarah Shirley, who I knew from my time at the Pentagon. We were a team working on suicide prevention among the active duty military. And I'll let her tell you more about her role, but that's kind of how we segued into each other's lives. And that understanding that spirituality, moral injury, overcoming trauma, and that trauma-informed perspective really did have sort of its foot in both worlds, right? That what we were doing as mental health providers, there was also this focus from the clergy and the chaplains who were trying to also counsel service members with maybe a little bit of a different bent to just how the interaction went. At the end of the day, I used to call it all adult supervision. It was just, you needed that person, that safe, trusted person that you can hang on to and share what was going on in your life. So as I moved from working with the military into whistleblowing, and we started to look at mental health and the components of mental health, it was an obvious connection to me that there needed to be this focus on spirituality and spiritual health as a component of mental health when we were talking about whistleblowers and restorative justice, and how do we overcome and heal from these traumatic stressors and wounds when whistleblowing has become an adversarial life event, and it costs us, right? I mean, we use the giraffe as our mascot. When we stand tall and stick our necks out, we risk criticism, and sometimes that criticism and that blowback is extremely harmful to us and our families. So I am going to begin by introducing our panel. I've already mentioned Sarah, but Dave Tenenbaum and Joe Carson are two other whistleblowers that I've come to know over the years, who I've also come to know their faith has been very meaningful to them in this journey. And what we normally do is we start with the panel, we do a round of introductions, a couple of minutes, and then we go into some Q&A, and then the last half hour or so, we kind of open it up for discussion and questions from the audience or comments from the audience. And the one other thing that I'll mention, so I don't forget, Sarah and I have been in discussions about Whistleblowers of America, having sort of like a chaplain advisor for her to fill that role, and maybe starting like a fellowship meeting that could maybe meet monthly. And I've compared them to like AA meetings or mindfulness trainings, where we can incorporate some of the healings and the spiritual healings that we think might work. So there will definitely be more to come on that over the next few months. But this is our opportunity to kind of introduce you and Sarah to us. So I'm going to let Sarah introduce herself, and then Dave, who's also on our board, and Joe, I will call on them to do a quick introduction. And then, like I said, we'll go into the Q&A. And if people want to go into the chat and introduce yourselves and make connections in the chat, that would be helpful as well. And if you have questions, we will get to them if you want to put them in the chat. Or if you want to, at the bottom of your screen, there should be a raise your hand feature, and that will create a queue for questions. So Sarah, go ahead and introduce yourself and say hello.
Thanks, Jackie. So as Jackie said, I'm Sarah Shirley. I'm a retired Air National Guard chaplain and an Episcopal priest from the Diocese of Washington. Some of you probably saw my bishop giving the homily at the inauguration week prayer service and saw all of the fallout from that. So we were all very proud of her. And I will say that even though Jackie and I have been friends and colleagues since, oh gosh, I guess about 10 years, longer, 12 years, I never thought of myself as a whistleblower until recently. I just thought of myself as doing the right thing. But starting in 2012, I guess, when I was at the Guard Bureau and I reported perjury that had been committed in an IG investigation, I had reprisal actions taken against me for, over a decade. And then Jackie and I sort of bonded when the same guy at Special Operations Command was trying to get both of us. And, he succeeded. Okay, good on him. But I hadn't really realized quite how disruptive and kind of traumatic the whole thing was until recently. And it's been really wonderful to reflect on all of the people that have been in these whistleblowing circumstances that I've worked with and counseled and provided spiritual direction for over the years, and the kinds of healing and reconciliation liturgies that I've provided. And ironically, just yesterday, I'm at a church. I'm the rector of an English-speaking Anglican church in Mexico right now, in the state of Jalisco. I've been here just about 4.5 months. And the very first thing I had to deal with was there was this really complicated, shrouded in mystery lawsuit that had been pending with the labor board against a music minister who had been fired and had never been given the legally required severance pay. So it just kept mounting and mounting and mounting because the courts here are very labor friendly. And as I learned what had actually happened, he was a whistleblower. And this was all reprisal taken against him. And so it was very interesting. So I settled that yesterday. And of course, I was really on his side. And I have no idea why the church was opposing any of this. So, holding people accountable to do the right thing is a pretty big path to take. So I'm glad to be here and glad to be finally getting kind of officially involved with Whistleblowers of America.
Great. Dave, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm David Tenenbaum. I work for the U.S. Army. Was the Tank Command when I first started out, going back about 1984, I believe. I'm not even sure. I don't remember at this point. I'm considered a whistleblower also. I'm actually a combination whistleblower, and the reason the Army went after me was because of anti-Semitism. I'm an Orthodox Jew as well. And sometimes I think of myself as a poster boy for whistleblowers because my case has been going on for 28 years. And I think it's a record. I'm not sure it's a great record to have, but it is a record. I was fired from the Army about 3 years ago. I'm still trying to get to arbitration because it's part of the union that I belong to. And when I was fired, they kind of like, there's no pension, there's no medical, there's no 401k, everything's kind of like gone, poof. But I believe that the whistleblower part was because I was working on a program to upgrade and up armor the Humvees, which, as we know, were decimated in the Iraq War and Afghanistan. And I think I ticked a lot of people off. I was working with the Germans and Israelis on that program, and we told them if they don't do something about these vehicles, if something happens, soldiers will die, and that's just what happened. So I'm happy to be on this panel. Wait for any questions. If anybody wants to know anything, I'm happy to answer the best I can.
All right. Yes. Well, we will definitely come back to more of that story. But I don't want to miss introducing Joe Carson.
Good evening. I'm glad to be part of this. And people who watched last month had a chance to watch my wife.
Yes,
And Dave, I don't want to steal your thunder, but I've been at this for now 34 years as a whistleblower. Even though I retired, I prevailed. I call myself the GOAT of career federal whistleblowers. I prevailed no fewer than 8 times at MSPB. I played a role in getting a law passed by which 150,000 patriotic Americans have got over $20 billion in compensation for being put in harm's way in Department of Energy workplaces in the Cold War, primarily making nuclear weapons. And so my story, there's a lot of strands to it, but whistleblower stories are all morality tales about divided loyalties. And in my case, I've got my engineer fingers right. Myself and family, my employer, my country, my profession, and God and faith community. I'm not going to say it's in priority, but if they all point in the same direction, gee, isn't life simple? Right? They don't always, which makes us humans. That's why I'm a theist Christian, is because we don't just work by instinct. There's a morality to us that doesn't seem to exist in any other part of the known universe. So where did that come from? And I guess we can all have different theories for it, but my theory is I'm an engineer. I see too much design, a sense of divitatis to just say it was all chance and necessity or evolution or some other cause. But having said that, it's a statement of faith, not fact. But when you get into the science of that kind of stuff, it becomes pretty metaphysical too, because you can't recreate the initial conditions. So I prevailed 8 times as a whistleblower, and you know what my church told me when I asked them to condemn the established, final, repeated record of law breaking against me? You're being pretty selfish to even ask. Now you want to follow the reasoning trail? Okay. All right. The reasoning trail was I work in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. The biggest source of fresh green cash in East Tennessee is the Department of Energy. I still had a nice job. And if the church criticized the record of law breaking against the Department of Energy, Congress might give DOE and Oak Ridge less money next year and people would be put out of work and I still have a nice job. Aren't I being selfish? Real reason. If we do that, some people may choose not to put their butts in our pews and put money in our plates. It's really us that we're concerned about, okay? So that was my road to Damascus moment when the scales fell from my eyes. I said, oh, now I understand Jim Crow, tobacco farming, slavery. It's all about the buck. Wasn't I silly? Okay.
Yeah. So I definitely, I agree. And I think those are those conflicts of interest and where one sense of morality might compete with another. But I think you raise a really interesting point, is that you did go to you went to the church.
Right.
But but I know you've remained faithful all these years. You're the one who's talked about Wild Goose Festival, and I mean, you've actually prodded this issue for Whistleblowers of America for a while. So what and I'm pivoting here, what
Okay.
makes you, what brought your faith into this, and what keeps you committed to seeing this as a spiritual issue?
Well, I'm trying to say spiritual because there's a mixture of motivations, of which spirituality is one. But I mentioned like the 5 different loyalties, right? So they're not all God and faith community. But bottom line, I'm not optimistic that people born in 2025 will die natural deaths. I see civilizational doom as all too likely, or all too possible, if not likely. And then the remaining spins around the sun. God is my judge if there's a God. Nature is my judge if there's a nature. Stoicism is my judge if there's stoicism. Whatever. I'm going to try to move the needle towards a world that works for all. And in 2025, I would say, as a Christian, the gospel of Jesus is not so much about how to save your butt from hell, but how to advance a world that works for all. If we don't all have that as a goal, we will destroy ourselves. Let me just go on. My first full-time job, I was military also, on a ballistic missile submarine, the ultimate terror machine, designed to kill 20 million people. And that was, coming up on 50 years ago, and the doomsday clock is now a lot closer to midnight now than it was then. I am not optimistic. And I look at whistleblowers as being essential parts, if you will, the immune system of societal institutions such as corporations, governments, whatever, to keep them from becoming self-serving rogues. And, we pay a high price and the church basically bystands. So I'm a little different. I'm fine. I am fine personally. I get gold medals at Senior Olympics. I'm worth more than $1 million. Happily married for 40 years. My kids are healthy. I'm fine. All right. So, but our world is not fine. And that's why I'm here. Okay. So I'll try to be supportive of the peers, but we are up against entrenched institutional evil. There will be casualties. We have to accept that. And where's the church other than saying, don't be selfish? So Sarah, I'm putting you on the spot, but I actually met Bishop Buddy a couple of years ago at her house about a death penalty thing. What would happen to you if I came to Bishop Buddy or came to you, Sarah, and saying, hey, I just filed an amicus brief alleging civilization-threatening law breaking in a couple of agencies. Are you going to do anything other than bystand and say you'll get your reward in heaven? I have yet to hear anybody do that. So, that's my testimony, and I'm still here talking. And it really is about nuclear weapons, not the deep fat fryer. I don't know what else to say. Over.
Well, that's really interesting. I just had a conversation today about how I would absolutely not be part of a church if I had not felt the need to leave the country because of what's going on in our country. And I couldn't bear to witness it, especially, I'm caregiving for a couple of people with dementia, and I couldn't bear it. It broke my heart. I don't carry the Constitution around with me anymore like I used to. And I would not be part of a church really for the very reasons that you are saying. And so it's very interesting trying to repair the parish that I'm repairing. And the parish that I'm repairing has been shrouded, secrets, sidebar conversations, not telling the truth about what's going on, avoiding conflict, on and on and on. And I just don't do that, right? I just don't do that because I don't need to do that. I don't have $1 million. I wish I did, but I have enough for now. And I'm just going to do the right thing. And I'm not always going to get it right. And I'm not I don't have perfect integrity. And I still feel like getting revenge on people sometimes. But I'm enough to kind of do the right thing. And I just preach from the gospel. Now, that doesn't mean that the gospel is the only right thing. There's certainly plenty of ethical teachings in Judaism. But I guess I really put doing the right thing ahead of, I just don't think much of religion. I think a lot of the gospel. I think a lot of morality. I think a lot of those things. And I think personal responsibility is everything.
So let me bring Dave back into this conversation. You were obviously a man of faith before becoming a whistleblower. how did that, or did that play a role in your decision making to become a whistleblower? And how has your faith helped sustain you through the whistleblowing? And then was your clergy helpful?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of questions that
John Peck there, I know.
yeah, I should have taken notes. It's important to recognize that the way we grow up and the morals that are instilled in us by our parents in the school, that becomes part of this. So to me, it's difficult to separate when I made certain decisions. Was I say, okay, this is a religious thing, or this is just morale thing, or whatever? It's all part and parcel. So for me, when I made the decisions, it was more like my job. There's no such thing. We believe there's no such thing as in coincidences. When something happens, there's a reason behind it. Do I know the reason? No. My job is to do the best I can and to help people. My job that I felt, if people would say to me, what's your job? Well, I was in survivability. I was in armor. So my job was to make the vehicles, tanks, Bradleys, safer for the soldier. My job was to make sure they came home alive and in one piece. They have families. We want to make sure that they're okay. So when I made those decisions, it was based on this is the right thing to do, and that's what I was taught. And that's within Orthodox Judaism or Judaism in general. It's a very moralistic religion. I don't want to make comparisons. I'm just saying this is the way it is. But I had a tremendous amount of support from my family. As you know, Jackie, you interviewed my wife was on last week, and if it wasn't for seriously my family or my community backing me, then it will be extremely difficult. And if it wasn't having, like, I'll give an example. And when I was eventually suing the government, and I was walking around the federal courthouse with one of my attorneys who was not Jewish, and he looked at me and he said, you know, Tannenbaum, you should be in jail right now. And I said, wait a second, you know I didn't do anything wrong. He said, I know you didn't do anything wrong, but it makes no sense. If the government starts to go after you and they put millions of dollars into my case, literally, they had been investigating me for years beforehand, which I didn't even know. And we know that because I was followed 24 hours a day for at least 6 months. And it was just an incredible, with the millions of dollars. He said, if they wanted to, they would have put you away. He said, I don't understand it. And I don't know why I said what I did, but I said that the difference between me and you is you're an atheist. You don't believe in God. I believe in God. And I believe if I was supposed to be in prison, okay, I'd be there. But my job is to try to figure out why. That you can't control what happens to you. The famous quote I use all the time: you can't control what happens to you, but you can control your attitude towards what happens to you. And then you'll master change. Then you'll actually do something about it. And I guess for myself, I know if I interviewed people when I was working on my dissertation, people that went through horrendous, terrible things and lost their jobs, lost their ability to work at all. They lost their husbands, their wives, their husbands, whatever. And I looked at myself. I said, wait a second. How come at least I think I'm normal. How did I come out still normal? And it was because of recognizing that I can't control it. Whatever's supposed to be happening to me, even now. Yeah, I've been like when I finally got fired, I remember somebody looked at me and said, "Why do you think why is it so funny?" And I said, "Because I feel great now. Now, I don't have to deal with them anymore." And I remember just bouncing to something else. I've looked for jobs since then. I've probably put out at least 200 resumes, and I think I have a fairly good resume. And everything's Google now. Everything's Google. So I put in for a job. Within 20 minutes, I got turned down. 20 minutes. That's got to be a record. So I remember telling my daughter, and I think Jackie's spoken to her. I told my daughter, I said, "You're not going to believe this. I got turned down for a job within 20 minutes." I was laughing. She said, "Why do you think it's so funny?" I said, "Because, honey, there's someone behind. There's a reason that you're supposed to be this way, and I find it funny." So I look at things that, okay, this is the way it is. I've got my family. This is extremely more important to me than anything. And religion, yeah, it's all there. That's what keeps us going. If you don't,
Mhm.
it's pretty difficult to live in this world. It's really hard.
So one of the things, Dave, I've always loved about you is your sense of humor. Do you think that it's your faith and your humor that kind of come together to help you sort of make sense of situations for you?
I think it's all part of it. As my kids always say to me, because my boys inherited my warped sense of humor, much to my wife's dissatisfaction. And I think one has to have a sense of humor about things. I don't mean make fun of things. God forbid. We should never make fun of anybody or anything. It's just, I teach a class, and the class is really in the same synagogue for almost 20 years. And I remember we teach, or the group is dealing with ethics, what you're allowed to say, what you can say about people. We're very careful about language we use, and about even saying something negative about somebody. We call it, I gotta think of the English translation, it's Hebrew, but it's evil speech, so to speak. You don't speak about people behind their backs. You don't do that kind of thing. And it's like Lashon Hara. I'm sure you know, Jack.
Yeah. You just triggered a memory.
Yeah. So it's a combination. I think religion teaches us to recognize there's someone above us, and there's someone that's controlling everything. Our job in this world is to be the best we can, and to help other people, to do good things. And that might not, sometimes it doesn't go in the direction we think, but that's because we're supposed to go in a different direction. But we don't know what that direction is, but that's okay. As long as you're continuing to be good, you're doing okay. So yeah, the sense of humor, it definitely helps, because it helps bring people in. It helps them to recognize that I'm not some type of crazy person. Although that could be dependent on a bunch of things too. But it's the one thing that's been hard for me, although my kids have made me feel better about it, especially when the case was going on. I lost time with my family. I was trying to stay out of jail, and I couldn't go on trips with my wife. My wife's not from here; she's from somewhere else, and she would take the kids somewhere, and I couldn't go because I was busy. I had to come back from a trip, even when I started suing the government, probably even up until a few years ago. And I remember speaking to one of my kids at the time, who wasn't even born when it first happened. He said, "You don't even know the effect it had on us." And it just struck me. It's like, my gosh, he wasn't even born, and it had an effect on him. Because
it's going on his whole life.
Yeah, two of my kids will not read the book. They will not read my book. They said it's too hard. They saw how much, if you read the book, you see, it wasn't meant to make people feel sorry for me. That's not the point. It was to let them know really what happened. But it's too difficult for them to see what happened to their father. And which I totally understand. So it's funny, because I was just asked, I think I told you, I was just asked to go speak somewhere, like 3 different places next week. I'm traveling, and I decided to start speaking again. And it's all of a sudden I got a call from somebody, "Hey, would you come speak over here?" So people have to recognize if it's only just to make them understand that, we're here for a purpose, and just be good. That's all you have to do.
Now you sound like my mother. Just be good. I put the name of the book, Accused of Treason, in the chat. I didn't have time to grab the link. But Sarah, so I think one of the things that when I'm talking to whistleblowers, and some of the things Dave said and Joe said earlier about meaning and purpose, and why we do all of this, I think it's a big component of why whistleblowers become whistleblowers, is because of that sense of meaning and purpose. But what do you do, or or how could we help when people feel like, they did the right thing and they've been betrayed, and now they feel lost and purposefulness or purposeless, and just that dejected and banished, and that sense of belonging and mission is gone?
I think it could be really helpful to turn to some of our great stories and the great religions, right? Midrash tell many stories of life being very unjust. And certainly, I mean, the gospel story is all about Jesus doing the right thing and getting murdered over it, right? So I think for people of faith, there's always stories from their traditions. There was a great movie. I'm just calling it to mind now, and I'm sure you guys remember the name of it. It was a slave ship. Does this ring a bell?
The Armstrong?
Yes, Armistead and the enslaved people were in this jail, and somebody brought them an illustrated New Testament. I don't know if it was the whole Bible or just the New Testament, and there was an illustrate, and they didn't read English, and there was an illustration of Jesus being crucified, and they looked at this and said, he didn't do anything wrong, and they killed him. I guess we're not bad people. I guess it isn't our fault. And I think that's kind of a paradigmatic religious experience for people that do the right thing and get really screwed for it. It's very honorable and very traditional. Do the right thing and get screwed for it.
Joe, I was going to come back to you anyway, and I also wanted to ask you a little bit about the Wild Goose Festival, but go ahead.
Okay, so Sarah, I'm pushing at you because you're the professional religious person, and over the decades that my thing has gone on, so many of your colleagues have said, Joe, you'll get your reward in heaven, but I can't get involved because I get involved, I'll lose my job, I got a family to feed, shalom. And at one level, I don't disagree with them. Had those ministers at the church, was a Presbyterian church in Knoxville, written a letter to DOE, there would have been blowback, okay? Because a lot of people get a buck out of DOE, all right? So I can see their point of view, but is that the final answer? And so now I go to a Methodist church, and I cannot find any history of the Methodist church ever saying anything to any established legal record of corporate or government law breaking that kills people. BP Gulf Horizon pled guilty. BP pleads guilty to 11 charges of criminal manslaughter. Does the Methodist Church say boo? No. PG&E pleads guilty to 88 manslaughters at one of these fires. Does any religious group say anything? No. So I look at it as kind of a modern day version of indulgences. The church is the chaplain of the powers that be, and basically the powers that be by the silence of the church to their wayward ways. And someone like me comes along and says, well, the prince has no clothes. I'm the problem. Okay? And I'm trying to...
I'm the problem too. I mean, I'm the problem too. And the Christian church has not been anything but Constantinianism for many hundreds of years. Yep. So, it's sort of the way it is. I think Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King did some great stuff. Look what happened to him. Yep. I'm just, we have
all right. So
we have a tradition of you do the right thing, you get killed. That's our religious tradition, among Christians. Hello. And what can I say? I don't think it's honorable. I don't think it's right. But that's why I don't have much of a church pension. But the bishops do. It's not a great thing. I will have to look up and see. There is the Episcopal Peace Fellowship. I don't know what they've done and not done. I would have to look and see if the Episcopal Church has done anything at all. I honestly don't know. And again, it's like, yes, I'm a religious professional. How connected am I? I mean, so on Monday, Thursday, right? So we just finished Holy Week. And Holy Week in the Christian church, on Thursday, we commemorate Jesus's last meal with his disciples and his commandment to serve each other, and he washes a bunch of feet. And then on Friday, Jesus is killed. Saturday, we experience the world without this teacher. And then Sunday, he's raised from the dead. On Maundy Thursday, an hour before we were having services in my church, the bishop had called this urgent meeting with his lawyers, who my parish mistakenly hired to deal with this employment issue, with the lawyers of the former employee, who were much more helpful than our lawyers. I mean,
Right.
the whole thing was, and we started out with him saying, we don't bribe judges, the bishop, we don't do these things. And I said, great, then we can settle this quickly because we were wrong. Right? But then the bishop's lawyers start saying all the reasons we weren't wrong, and on and on. And I'm like, fine, but we were wrong and we're going to pay. All right. So we finally, the bishop finally lets these lawyers that my parish has been paying to do the wrong thing know that they have to cooperate with doing the right thing. They're Anglican. My former employee, well, he wasn't my former employee, my new friend, the former employee of the church, his lawyers are Roman Catholic. They're there with their children because this is Semana Santa. Nobody works on Monday, Thursday in Mexico. So at 11, we finally finish at like 7 minutes to 11. We all go in my office and put our vestments on because the bishop is going to celebrate and preach, blah, blah, blah. Who leaves? The Anglican lawyers. Who stays for church? The Roman Catholic lawyers and their children. Religious people usually don't do the right thing. I certainly haven't always done the right thing in my life. And it's always problematic when you mix money and morality. It's just problematic because of this, of the 7 deadly sins, pride heads the list, and I think greed follows a close second.
Yeah. Well,
And
David, I think those are the biggest threats to national security.
Yes,
Right?
the 7 deadly sins. So Dave's had his hand up too. I think
Go ahead,
he's been
please.
wanting to jump in.
I was just going to say, I mean, I hear what you guys are saying. I think it's an important point, Joe, you're making as well. I would throw this out like the typical question: why do bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people? And we don't know. And I told myself a long time ago, I'm not going to try to figure out why some of these people are doing what they're doing. It's not. It'll just mess me up. And it doesn't.
Well,
I won't have an
Dave, I
answer.
got to interject. 150,000 people got hurt because people like me wouldn't do our jobs because we wanted the money. So I know why 150,000 people got hurt in the Department of Energy facilities. Okay, I know why 88 people died in a fire caused by defective equipment. All right, it's not always a mystery. There really is evil.
I'm not
Okay.
I'm not debating that. I'm saying you're right. Look, the fact that you're a whistleblower, I'm a whistleblower. They came after me for anti-Semitism, for sure. I could tell you. I'm not debating whether somebody's evil, but I'm not going to try to figure out for myself why they're doing what they're doing, or why they're getting away with it, because I have no idea. I'm never going to come up with an answer for that. I prefer to work on myself and to help other people do it as well.
I still want it's going to blow up, so I can't let myself up quite that easy when I go ride my e-bike. Okay, so we just differ. I mean, at some level, I agree with you, but I still have agency and I still have responsibility, and I can still make a change. So I don't just want to say I can't understand, so therefore, boom. No.
Well, I'm not saying I can't do anything about it. I'm working on that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have written a book. What I'm saying is that I'm not going to try to delve into what's in their minds, because I'm not a prophet, and I'm not a mind figure outer. So my job is still to work on myself, and my job is to make sure people do come out good. And will I go after people that did this? To some degree, as much as I can, but I'm not going to take away from my family to do that.
Well, and I think
Protecting myself.
that's the balance between vengeance and justice. And I think the trying to figure out the what is justice and the pathway to justice
Right.
is something that a lot of whistleblowers struggle with. And I think trying to hold on to your faith as you do that is part of the challenge. And one of the reasons I wanted to have this discussion tonight was, where does your faith keep you going? How does it help people get through these dark, tough times? I mean, if you have no faith and you believe that evil rules the world, then you could really let it all just devolve instead of having faith and hope and wanting things to be better. And I think for most of the whistleblowers I've talked to, that's really more of their passion. It's that commitment to wanting to hold on and make things better. But I'm also mindful that we've done a lot of talking, and we've not let the audience ask any questions or anybody else interject. I haven't seen anything in the chat, otherwise I would have jumped in with that. But I'm happy to entertain any questions or have other folks who have joined make comments. I've seen I don't know if there's been a problem with the link tonight, but I've seen people bouncing on and off. But I know this has been a topic many people have asked me about, and we've had some conversation. Like I said, we're trying to figure out how we build resilience through a spiritual connectivity. So if anybody else wants to join this conversation or has some of their own thoughts about how their spirituality has helped them through some of this, I'm inviting you to share some of your thoughts as well. It's not usually a shy group. But this is, I think, a difficult subject. I think it does, make people uncomfortable to share and discuss this in a multi-faith segment.
Let me go ahead, Rob. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a very interesting discussion. Touched on actually a bunch of different subtopics like behavioral psychology of the individuals and of the individuals as part of groups, whether it's religious or not. It actually, many of the things you said apply to lots of different groups of people and their willingness to, be concerned and protect themselves. But I think part of what's built into people that's in our favor is that I think the majority of people aren't really quite as quote unquote evil or predatory or feral, whatever you want to call it, as you might think. And so there's a lot of resource there, but at the same time, the kinds of people, at least as we teach it, who are the ones who are going to be taking negative actions, they tend to be the personalities that are also going to dominate. We call them high defective people. So that D, we can use a lot of their deviants. They've got the personality disorders, but they're also domineering. They're very dominant. So you're kind of at a disadvantage in that way, but numerically not. So, I think that there's the second part of it is internal. So I can hear all of you, Joe and all of you, all of the speakers are great because internally, what you feel, probably the majority of people feel, if not more than a majority, it could be, high level of drive. And so a way I think of it is you can teach it sort of like, we're almost like cells in a body politic. Biology scales incredibly from down to molecules all the way up. So I think of myself anyways, whistleblower. It's just a T cell. I've just been educated through my life, which is what happens to T cells, right? With not a thymocyte cell, we're kind of more like Terminator cells, but whatever. So that's just our natural function. I don't worry about it. I mean, these other guys to me are kind of like cancer cells. They're going to do their thing. They're going to behave. They're going to try to grab resources. And I just do my thing. And you wouldn't want cells in your body having these kind of debates. You just know you've got these cells floating around. They should be just you rely upon them just to attack. They may not succeed. The body politic may die of cancer, let's say. It happens. But you do your things, and collectively and even individually, you could be the one that can make the difference. So, I don't sweat it too much beyond that. It's I don't attribute myself to, but yeah, as far as, so that's one level anyway. There are other levels, but that's one way I look at it, biologically speaking.
But where does faith come in? Do you think faith is biologically based?
Yeah, I get this question from the students all the time. I tell them, you have to ask, because I teach biology. And so, yes, I do think it is, but there may be more to it. I mean, I get the question all the time, hey, about, they really want it. I think they should be talking to physicists. But yes, there's a lot of possibility that, people think all kinds of things. I teach, when I start teaching about evolution, the Matrix. I show these little clips, and people are saying we're part of a simulation, and there's all levels of it. There's God or gods, and so on and so forth. Is it built into us? It could be real. It could be in the dark matter phase. It's all around us. There's a million things. I'm not a physicist, so I'm not going to claim that. I'm not a real religious preacher either. But I think it's an important, at the very least, it's worth having that feeling and belief. It's just like ego is also a driver. Anger is a driver. All those things are valuable to us. Actually, the students, get really concerned about getting too angry. I said, no, then you talk about Jesus. He went into the, into the crowd. He was kicking over tables and things. He got upset, and that's actually a motivator. It's actually not bad. I said, don't worry. It's how you use that, how you channel that motivation, that those behaviors that matters. You don't want to hurt someone. You don't want to physically do something unless, of course, you're attacked. But you don't want to do that. So you have to channel things properly. But you have these built in, whether they're God-given or biologically derived, what have you. You don't have to know the answer. They're beneficial to you. Your ego is actually not bad. It's good to want to be successful because every little cell in your body, if it had its own little ego, you want it attacking those virus-infected cells or cancer cells. You don't care. You just want them to do their thing, just like we should do our things.
So what about this idea of building moral community? Is whistleblowing and building a new community almost like what religion does for us? It gives us a sense of community and belonging. And is that healing?
It's camaraderie. It's having people that have gone through similar things that you've gone through, and they understand. People who are whistleblowers know what it feels like, and to have a group that really can understand. I mean, there are times, even with myself, and I'm sure Joe, you've gone through this too, that you could speak to your family, you could speak to your wife about it, but they're not going to understand it as much. You need someone similar, and you also need someone like a spouse or someone to kind of put you in the right direction sometimes and say, "Oh, you got to stop. You can't do this." Like one thing that used to happen with me is that when I would go for discussions with somebody and maybe get some help, they said, "Okay, we want to help you. Are you looking for revenge, or are you looking to really do something positive?" I said, "I'm not looking for revenge on people. I want to do something positive. I want to get the right things done." Every character trait has its negatives and its positives, like Rob I think was saying too. You just have to know when to use what. Anger has its moments too. And pride has its moments too. But you got to know when to use it. And that's what having somebody within your own community can say to you, "Hey, you need to stop what you're doing now. You're going to hurt yourself. You're going to hurt other people as well."
Joe, I think you once sent me something about the pro-social foundation. And I think that's, this pro-social movement about moral community and social justice and building that. I think, Sarah, you said something earlier about, that's our purpose in life is to sort of do the right thing, uplift each other, and find higher meaning or higher purpose for what we're doing, regardless of our profession. We've got engineers and biologists and, the clergy, and I'm a social worker. So I know there's a bunch of different backgrounds, and people are from other countries I see on here as well. So, this isn't just an American dynamic right now, but I think we're also looking at a maybe a cultural phenomenon, a religious phenomenon, that when we bring those nuances into the workplace, sometimes we're met with understanding, and sometimes we're met with discrimination and harassment and retaliation. So how do we build that pro-social? And again, how do we keep the faith? Not to sound like a 1970s commercial.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of still, trying to scratch the itch. One of the things I did with Wild Goose is it took about 10 years, but they actually changed their commitment statement to where it has positive things about whistleblowing, social justice. Right? That took about 10 years. Again, I'm the one who tapped too many nuclear weapons on that depleted uranium nose tips. I really have, really. Okay. I'm the one who helped write the Code of Ethics for the American Nuclear Society, which is the world's leading professional group for nuclear, right?
Mhm.
I'm the one who read State of the World from a young age. I read 200 books a year. I think I'm pretty informed about, I might be in a stateroom, but I'm on Titanic, really, okay? And I am on a stateroom. I have a very privileged life, please. I read enough to know one sound bite. So my parents had 5 kids. 7 years later, we're all still alive and healthy. What other place and time would that even be conceivable, right? And here it's not that unusual, okay?
Mhm.
I'm playing senior Olympic basketball at 71. Hello, what kind of world is this, right? And I get to think it's, okay, but the flip side is we as a human species have just changed our relationship to this natural order that has allowed us to create this advanced civilization, which is fragile, which requires institutions that people can trust. Or we will not deal with the collective action problems of global warming, species deprivation, extinction, on and on and on. So I'm kind of thinking, I think big, I think systematically, like engineers should, in my opinion. So yeah, I'm running the gauntlet for many years, just like David did. But I'm also saying, why am I running this gauntlet for just doing my duty to protect others? And I realized, I kept citing, I'm an engineer, I'm a professional engineer, I'm just doing my job. And the attorneys would say, okay, well, we're attorneys. And let me tell you the 3 rules for attorneys. We are hired guns. Our client is never wrong, and we will do whatever we can get away with to prevent any determination otherwise. And you know what? That's legal ethics. It really is. I can't say that's misconduct. No, that is legal ethics. And when
Mhm.
you're representing a person, sure. But when you're representing a multi-billion-dollar government entity that's responsible for nuclear weapon security, I don't think so. Okay? So I'm getting down to the fundamentals. If we're going to change this around, we have to look at the scope of legal ethics, corporate personhood, and because most of the people here, why are we victims? I just told you why. Legal ethics.
Mhm.
Those lawyers go home, kiss their spouse, feel good about themselves. They're being good attorneys. And the
Mhm.
Yeah, I think
repercussions
that's
are
a really
right on.
important point. Yeah. Uh, I
All
have
right,
to agree
I'll
with
let it
I have
go.
to I have to agree with Joe on that. I think that's a big driving engine. That's when I talk about the cancer, it actually is a system. It's like leukemia. It's spread throughout the body, and it really does go through exactly what you said, through the legal system, at least as far as the United States. But what we've seen is other countries too, and I think you're absolutely right to address that and focus on it. And the problem with it is it's sort of almost brilliantly constructed to engage with human nature. I mean, the amount of money, the sort of the way it motivates people to, in effect, undermine your own civilization is kind of the problem. One of them, anyway. I think you are correct in that. One of the ways you get this in class too. Is, well, you have to look. We try to learn the whole scope of human civilization, the development of our species, and it's very technology based. So often we've advanced past these kind of hurdles by going to technology. And one of the things that heartens me today is it's difficult to beat this, but people are also prone. The ones that now exist have been selected mostly to really appreciate technology since the days people were inventing bows and arrows, or even earlier. So today I'm kind of a little more upbeat because of some of the technology where we could sort of substitute control by this little inbred self-regulating, judicial legal system that we have with more of a technology-based system. That's where AI has been like a shining sort of the sun rising for me recently, where you could basically, it's just a tool like any other tool, but you can somewhat substitute some of these this sort of self-regulating, I hate to say gang, but let's be honest, of the lawyers and judges and all that, with a bunch of, in effect, PhD database scientists and all sorts of other people somewhat more distant and independent of them, with a standards-based set of rules and ethics that people would more commonly accept if we put it out to the vote. No judges can't act maliciously the way they have it now in the United States, at least, and that they're immune. This immunity garbage, right? Of course, cancers want to be immune too. So anyway, I have some hope to address the kind of thing you're talking about, which I do agree is very central and fundamental, certainly in the United States. The technology could be one possible, very beneficial solution.
Well, I know when you talk about technology, you make Paul happy because that's one of his solutions for a lot of things that I have not a clue about. But I'm also hearing kind of this connection between faith and spirituality and ethics. And And I know there's differences in all of that, and maybe there's an overlapping and over that. But where does one help us heal the other? Because when we see unethical behavior in the workplace and we're taking the moral high ground, where do we get that commitment and that drive for that social justice? And then, I think the how we use that for our own resilience, because you can easily get stuck in the anger and the negative feelings and lose that hope and the positive feelings, which of course takes me into, this is how people get PTSD and depression and even become suicidal. So how do we build the converse of that, Reverend Shirley?
I think, some of what I'm hearing is like David's saying, we do what we can do, right? We do what we can do. We do the good we can in a world that is often not good. And I'm hearing Joe say it's unacceptable that other people and institutions don't participate in doing good. And yet, one thing I know is we can only do what we can do, and we cannot force other people to do things. Things as simple as at this little church where I am, there's some people that want people to shut up and be quiet during the organ prelude. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to tell adults what to do. I'll make an invitation. It's all I can do. The fact is that, there's a lot of evil in the world, and the primary values in at least in the US society are now and always have been greed and pride. I just was in denial about it for a long time. But in the military, chaplains used to be ethicists as well as lawyers being ethicists. They don't give a crap what the chaplains say anymore. It's all about covering your ass. And that is the context in which we're living. And I don't find it helpful to be angry about it. I find it helpful to hold my ground and try to teach and preach and say to somebody like Joe, okay, how can I help? I'll write a letter. I'll talk to my bishop. I'll do what I can do. And I'm sorry, most people are not going to do that. I wish they would. Mm-hmm. I was on several years ago, I was the only non-clinical faculty member of a mini residency in women's mental health for veterans. It was the VA and DOD. And I was asked to do spiritual aspects of struggle. And I had to go and do this workshop where I said, guess what? VA and military chaplains are often the worst offenders in causing moral injury. So clinicians, if you want to take good care of your patients, you need to know who your chaplains are, and you may need to go develop some other resources in the community, because you don't want to have, a Jewish soldier or a Buddhist veteran who comes and has some fundamentalist evangelical Christian try to convert them instead of helping them.
Right.
And, I really do think that acceptance of our context is a really good first step. Trying to change it is why things like the Wild Goose Festival exists. Those are the reasons why. But I know I can invite other people to change, but I sure can't change anybody. Half the time I can't change myself. I can at least invite and encourage people to take responsibility for their own actions, regardless of what other people do. And you know what? I was told not to report this stuff. I was told by the chaplains, okay, don't report the perjury. Very sorry, I have to.
So nobody's above it all, right? Wrongdoing and selfish behavior and self-serving and evil can be anywhere around us. And maybe I know Bali said she had to drop off the call, but she's always good at providing us with a resource. So in the chat, she said that people might be interested in a book called The Air We Breathe about Judeo-Christian ethics, which are foundational to our sense of justice and fairness. And she provided that link. So I've appreciated this discussion tonight. I started to get blown away about the multi dimensions that this went into. I think there is so much more to understanding this element than maybe I have given enough or not given enough deeper thought to.
But can I ask one thing before we go off just of Sarah and anyone else who's involved with religious communities, which is maybe if we go in the other direction, we being like Whistleblower of America, and take the stories, and instead of asking a higher level people, institutions to take the heat, which is what we've been hearing about, go the opposite way and maybe use democracy, so to speak, in a positive way. Sometimes it can have negative outcomes, obviously, but positive way. Go down into just let them give access to their parishioners or congregants to vote, so to speak, even anonymously, and just get a mass. Because I think if you ask, say, the mass of people, you could go outside of a church or something, anything, religious institution, but you could start there and just say, here's a story of a person trying to be a moral individual, trying to help. Here's the story. How would you vote? About that. And I think just that mass vote, I think number one will be very, very favorable. And that alone is a tool of value to us and everyone else to actually say you've got backing. Because one of the things I find when we talk about these so-called evil people, I mean, they're just animals, to be honest. I'm a biologist, I know prejudice. They look to see that you're alone. And if you're not alone, they want to make you alone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
This is very, very, they'll say it to you. When they feel they've got you alone, they'll actually come out and say it because, you're the isolated animal. They're going to eat you, right? The pack is going to rip you to pieces. So that might be an approach where we could, instead of trying to somehow convince the bishops or high level people or the priests, to take themselves, because they're people too. And there are money issues with that particular church in this area, whatever. Go down and make it very broad, because I think it's a winning proposition. You'll find a lot of people inherently are good because we're bred to do that. Otherwise, we'd still be in the trees, fighting about the bananas. But that's just my view. But if you go down and get our stories down to this large number of people, you can protect them. They can just be anonymous but verified. It might actually be a beneficial way to go.
Can I add one thing too, Jackie, if you don't mind?
Sure, please.
I just wanted to say something. I think we're one thing we forget. This isn't an even playing field. It's just not. We're the people here are talking. We have morals. We have ethics. We're dealing with a broken system, an unethical system, unethical people with no morals, and they could care less about what we're trying to do. They can care less sometimes about the people involved, that the soldiers and everything else. And my father used to teach me. My father was a concentration camp survivor. He was in Auschwitz, and he was the only survivor in his family. And he was still with us. He was always positive. There are those that speak a lot about it, and there are those that don't. My father was one that did not speak about it at all. And I'm not a victim, and I refuse to be made into a victim, because once that happens, then they've won. And that's not how I grew up. So the way I look at things is, I'm not a victim. I am going to do what's right. I'm going to continue to do this, and I'm going to be positive about it. And my kids are going to see that, and the people that hang around me are going to see that as well. And that helps me move forward and helps things, and hopefully do good things as a group, which is like what Rob was saying, we're a pack. You're stronger in a pack, and that's what's necessary in this point. And I think that's going to scare the other side, so to speak, as well.
No, I love that. I love the idea. And to me, that's, when I use the terminology moral community, that's what I think we are. We're a shared lived experience moral community of whistleblowers who do have to become our own army and uplift each other's story. We might not always agree, and we might not have had the same whistleblowing experience, but I think when we stand together, we do become powerful. Nobody will eat us if there's too many of us. I love my
the water buffalo do gore those lions from time, when there's it happens all the time. I watch these videos every day.
That's why I love my giraffe mascot, because the giraffe does not roar.
One kick from that giraffe, and it's to heaven for the lion. Yeah.
Yes. So be a giraffe is my motto. And I think, I've appreciated that we ran a little over. We got started a little late, but I think this really was an amazingly interesting conversation. I would go on another hour, but I know Paul would kill me. So these are recorded. This will be up on our YouTube channel. May will have, what are we doing in May? I can't remember. We will have another session in May. And then, of course, we've already started getting out our whistleblower, our Workplace Promise Institute for April. Oh my goodness, I am tired, more tired than I'm thinking. For September 18 and 19, the American Legion is hosting us. I've already put together what I think is going to be a pretty interesting agenda. I think we're pretty, we have pretty much filled the seats. May 27th is our next one. I just had to look it up. Is going to be on recovery from unemployment, the rebuilding the professional self after whistleblowing, and I'm working on getting that ready and organized. Yes, recovery from. Thank you, Paul. So we'll see you next month. More to come about continuing maybe a fellowship circle with Sarah, and I will see you all very soon. So thank you for participating tonight. I really did appreciate this discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Nice chatting with you, everybody. Okay, bye-bye.